Happy Halloween, you goofy goobers. Nick here, and welcome back to the channel. Spooky season is here, and it's time to get into that holiday cheer of fear by looking at one of my favorite horror video games, Dead by Daylight. This is a go-to game for me and my partner, and something I've covered from time to time before becoming an MK content creator. Since these are technically fatalities, and since I've made my career covering finishers from Mortal Kombat, why not apply this to Dead by Daylight? In the spirit of the season, why not get all heck-cited and get dressed up for the occasion? You got a problem with me? I take Halloween serious. Get with it. To make sure everyone is represented in this ranking and to cover the current 33 chapters in this game, I'll cover every single killer as well as the unique and legendary costumes with their own unique finishers, meaning characters like Naughty Bear and Were Elk will be included as their own entry in this list. However, if the legendary costume just does nothing different to the Mori, it won't be included. This goes for people like the Luxie, Mordeo, and the Attack on Titan crossover characters, just as an example. Lastly, I'll break down what makes each one of these so special or what makes them so good, whether it's the pacing, horror aspect, or fit to the character, or even whatever it's referencing with the licensed characters. In total, we've got 44 finishers to go through, so with that, let's enter the fog and rank all Memento Moris for the entity. Yep, easily falling into the bear trap at number 44 is the Trapper. With this game being out for nearly 9 years, this one has still aged like milk. He just stands over them and whacks them with his blade multiple times. And that's it. I know in the mobile game they added a couple more Moris for him, but in the console and PC version, his is nothing special. Hopefully this will get a major rework down the line. For now, the Trapper's Mori is easily the worst. Ringing the bell at number 43 is another original character from Dead by Daylight's launch, the Wraith. Though it's extremely similar to Trapper's Mori, they just get hit multiple times and that's it. One big difference that makes it slide ahead one more spot is how the survivor gets pulled closer to have the Wraith deliver the final blow. But what I mentioned about Trapper, the Wraith is in a serious need of a rework for the Mori to stand out and to ring that bell. Appearing from the shadows at number 42 with our first licensed character we're looking at is the Pig from the Saw franchise. This sees Amanda go for a stab and swipe at their neck to finish them off. The next swipe could be seen as a reference to the demise of John Kramer from Saw 3, now with a blade instead of a saw. But overall, this one's just extremely disappointing and bland. However, I do appreciate the survivor trying to defend themselves by having the blade get caught on their hand, but why not put a trap over their head to finish them off? Like, imagine her using the reverse bear trap, but it's rigged that they'll die no matter what. It's very fitting to the character, as no one else could use a weapon like that, and putting people in unbeatable traps is Amanda's thing. Overall, poor execution and very disappointing. Kramer would be very displeased with you, Amanda. Yet another classic OG character with the Nurse. This sees her strangle the opponent until they stop moving. Pretty simple and basic. But it is fitting to her backstory, as her victims were found with marks around their necks as they were strangled in the asylum that she worked at. However, in execution, it's very bland. Maybe if it utilized more of her weapon and the mix of her power, it could have been placed much higher. With the right changes, it could cure my boredom with this Mori. Droning on head first at everyone's favorite killer, the Skull Merchant. This sees her taking notes from the Melina Fatality School by seductively putting her hand on the opponent and then swiping their back similar to what the Predator would do. What makes this confusing is that the drone gets shown off early on and does nothing. It's set up to be cool, but it comes off extremely lame, kinda like the character. Also, the pacing. Similar to a weird Skullbot, it kinda drones on. For a disappointing character, they could have at least redeemed her with a better Mori. Alas, we were just graced with disappointment. Headed to the Coldwind Farm with the Hillbilly. Of the base game killers, it's one I do like a bit more, as it's not a whack ender. Instead, he holds them down and digs his chainsaw into the survivor, cutting them like a log of wood prepping for a cold Michigan winter. Though brutal and very straightforward, it's nothing too special. I do appreciate the splashes of blood, which is just something that makes it edge out over the other ones. Overall, still not great in comparison to the rest of the roster. Number 38, and we've got ourselves our first of a few unique Moris, this being the Tormented finisher for Pyramid Head. Some of the characters can just finish the opponent while they're in the dying state. Instead of doing a flashy animation, Pyramid Head will just swing his giant knife into the crawling opponent and finish them off like that. It's rather quick and snappy, but pretty bland. However, I do like when he does raise the blade out of the survivor. They're stuck on it for a bit and they get pulled along with the blade. It's pretty gross and a nice detail. If you're in the mood for a better finisher from the Silent Hill Executioner, just give it a little bit longer. You'll be pleased. Speaking of unique Moris, the twins go with the solo act this time around with just Charlotte finishing them off. If Victor isn't attached to Charlotte, she'll swipe their legs to the ground and hook their side, finishing them off. Yeah, it's nothing special and won't get you hooked, but at least it's a bit brutal. She gets a bit better when the dynamic duo are present, so stay tuned for that coming up shortly. For now, Charlotte really needs her little bro. At number 36, things are gonna get a little bit more electrifying as we look at the doctor. This regularly routine checkup doesn't go according to plan as it sees him perform electroshock therapy to your head until you're dead. I do appreciate how the eyes are smoking and how it ends with the doctor's signature laugh. But I wish it was a bit more brutal, maybe if like the eyes were missing or something. Still pretty solid, and yes, it's a much better visit than seeing Dr. Oz. From terrible healthcare practices to ancient sacrifices with the plague. This one's really cool in premise, but it could be a little bit better in execution. Hitting them over the head with the profane censer, she says a Babylonian ritual, strangles them, and then proceeds to vomit all over them. Hey, not kink shaming here. Honestly, it's a good setup, but how quickly it wraps up and how uneventful the end is what kinda kills it for me. If the ending were slightly different, it could have gone up a few more placements. Now in regard to all the vomiting and whatnot, that's just Pepto-Abysmal. Number 34, we've got ourselves another unique Mori, this coming from the Onryo, or Sadako. When the survivor stacks their condemned level to 7, Sadako can instantly kill them when they're down. And that's what you get with this one. Instead of it being a different setup where she uses telekinesis to break their limbs, she instead just stares into their soul and they die. With it missing the 2 parts compared to her actual Mori, it does look a little bland in comparison, but I do think that this is very unique and fitting as it causes the opponent's heart to stop. I even like the addition of the static screen ending it if you're the survivor. It's just very fitting to the character and that nice little touch of detail. And like a VHS tape, let's just fast forward and get to the better Moris. At number 33, we're going into the dream realm and looking at the Nightmare, also known as Freddy Krueger. This one sees him create almost a beat-for-beat remake of Jesse's death from the 2010 remake. Similar camera shots of Freddy's glove opening up, him disappearing behind the opponent, and his hand just popping through their chest. They fall over and Freddy's revealed there. Yeah, I didn't really say it was good, I just said it was referential. I really wish they just took more advantage of like the dream realm or did something unique. I think that would have been really cool instead of limiting themselves to a terrible movie. Yeah, this nightmarish Mori is one that you'll just wake up from and forget about. Hey, the dynamic duo is back in action at number 32 with the twins. Victor joins the team around this time as the opening is very similar, Charlotte knocking the opponent down to the ground. But what's different is I like how there's that little nod of approval as Victor jumps in, jumps on the survivor's back, and starts shredding apart their head. It's not as flashy as the other one, it's slightly better, and I do think that that little character dynamic is what makes this one pop so much more. This one's just also so adorable seeing siblings just come together. We're slicing our way into number 31 with the Spirit. This sees her go for a stab through the back, and as the opponent falls on the ground, she cuts them in the same spot she was cut when she died in her backstory. It's very cool when it comes to the referential to her backstory, but in terms of execution, I think it's alright. I do think capping it off with her just roaring at the dead body is a nice touch at the end, but that's really all I have to say about it. It's nothing really too special, it just cuts right in and gets the job done. At number 30, we're looking at one of my mains and looking at the Huntress. This one sees them turn the opponent around, asks them a question by lodging it into their face, which is actually really disturbing when they start reaching to try and pull it out. From there, she puts a boot to their face, pushes them away, and then just starts going to town at their ribs. Honestly, I appreciate how simple and straightforward this one is. It's just a solid axe to the face, there's not a whole lot happening or hatcheting, it's just good. Chops right in at 30. And speaking of mentioning the Huntress, at number 29, we're looking at the other variant of the Huntress, the Were-Elk. I honestly love how brutal and gross this one is. As the opponent tries to crawl away, the hatchet goes down on their back and pulls them in closer. The Were-Elk stares at them a bit and picks them up and holds them up off the ground. At this moment, the survivor just goes, oh dear. Then from there, the antlers get shoved into their back and they get flailed around and thrown behind them. And one gross detail is that the organs are stuck on the top of the antlers, somehow. My only complaints with this one is that I feel like it could have been sped up a little bit. The pacing's just a little bit off, but I do like the one part where it seems like there's like a hand cam motion to it. Makes it feel like that you are witnessing it as it's happening. But at the end of the day, this one just takes a lot of guts. Things are popping off at number 28 with The Blight. If you have an issue with body horror, you may not like this one, as it involves him injecting some weird goo into both their chest and their neck. After injecting the syringe, the opponent pulls it out and it starts building up some giant pustule on their neck. Honestly, looks like that Nickelodeon goo. From there, he swings down his weapon onto the pustule and it just pops all over the opponent and they're dead. Honestly, I do think that the timing of him swinging down and hitting the pustule is a little off. If they managed to time it perfectly, I think it would have been a little bit more satisfying with the conclusion. But I do think that it is very effective at being gross and delivering something that many other Moris couldn't do, leveraging a lot of weird science-y grossness to it. And with that, The Blight just pops off. At number 27, we got ourselves one of two of the Liches, or Vecna's Moris, this one being the Eye of Vecna variant. After a long, complicated process of getting an artifact called the Eye of Vecna and some survivor rolling a nat 20, you can actually do a second Mori where spikes shoot out of the ground as the opponent's on the ground, they get stuck, and skeletons decide to pull them down deeper onto the spikes, killing them pretty instantly. I just like to imagine that Vecna is a huge fan of the pit fatality from Mortal Kombat, so we decided to recreate it in the entity's realm. Pretty quick, efficient, and it's pretty brutal. Like the spikes, it's right on point. Looking beyond the stars and looking at my most requested character to join Dead by Daylight, and happy that they finally did, the Xenomorph. This creepy parasite from the stars stabs them with its weird, pointy tail, and then lifts them off the ground, doing a really nice tribute shot from either Alien vs. Predator and Aliens. As the survivor is in complete shock, the alien opens their mouth, and their giant little mouth inside their mouth shoots through their skull. I honestly love how this one is shot and framed. It really does feel like it's just lifted right from the Alien movie and put into this Mori. The solid reference makes for a solid Mori. The elements of horror and sci-fi make this a very extraterrestrial Mori. Number 25, and we are taking a look at the Pyramid Head's full Mori. This sees him lift the survivor off the ground, and then a bunch of barbed wire wraps the opponent and gets him stuck in a little cage. From there, he ends up stabbing them with his great knife and then twists it, and then the wire breaks apart and they fall to the ground. This Mori is actually somewhat inspired by A Way You Could Die in Silent Hill 2, where James Sutherland could be picked up off the ground and killed in a similar way. Nice to see them pay tribute and make it a Mori in this game. The addition of the twisted metal and the barbed wire trapping the opponent makes this a little bit more uncomfortable, but I think that's what makes me want to place this one so much higher. Good work, Pyramid Head. Now go and get some rest. Number 24, we're looking among the stars once again, and this time looking at the Singularity. This one just has a wonderful blend of just creepiness and goriness to it. First opening with the cold and disturbing monotone voice saying that this procedure is going to be painless, to which it is actually not, as he stabs them, lifts them off the ground, and then injects a bunch of needles and syringes into their face, so much so that their face just explodes and there's no skin left on it. I think the whole time during the procedure when he speaks, it just makes it more uncomfortable, like the "die fast please," and then even wrapping it up with "it is over," dropping their limp body. I'm not the biggest fan of the Singularity as a character, but I do think that just this element and aspect alone makes this Mori so special and unique. It's definitely disturbing, and it's also just very gory on top of it. Guess Hux was early enough to get his little worm. Hailing all the way from Texas is the cannibal himself, Bubba the Leatherface. Armed with his trusty chainsaw and cattle hammer, once the opponent's down, he gives them a good old whack to their head to get them dazed and confused. As they struggle to try and get away, he charges up the chainsaw, stabs it through their back, and then lifts the chainsaw up while they're screaming in pain and fear. Probably my favorite part of this is how this wraps up. It's a nice tribute to the very end of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where he's just chanting and screaming, flailing his chainsaw above his head all excitedly. Yeah, you did a good job there, Leatherface. Now bring that meat home for the family. From one iconic slasher to another, at number 22, we're taking Shape, by looking at Michael Myers. Now this one is an awesome reference to the 1978 film When He Killed Bob. Michael picks up the opponent, stabs him in the chest, and what's unique is that they actually try to fight back a little bit. As he digs the knife in deeper, they struggle and give up. From there, Michael just throws their limp body to the ground and he goes on slashing some more. This is a reference to Bob's death, but they couldn't really actually have him pin the opponent to the wall and give up his knife because, God forbid, he's not getting rid of that weapon. Now I am a little biased and I do wish he did a head tilt there, but I do appreciate the opponent looking into Michael's black and devilish eyes. And yes, I do know that the Tombstone variant is technically a different Mori because it has a different startup animation, but that's the only difference there. One either picks him up off the ground or one he just grabs him from behind and then stabs him. They're pretty much the exact same thing, so I'm just lumping them into one. In the end, it's Halloween and another trial, so they're entitled to one good scare and one good Mori. Now at number 21, I'm looking at my notes here and they look a little bit off and scribbled, so whatever reason we're supposed to be at Albert Wesker, but the name is scratched out with Tentacle Daddy. Rain, did you update my notes again? Either way, Tentacle Daddy just gets a punch to the face where his sunglasses come off. And if there's one thing you know about the cool guy with the sunglasses, never get rid of his sunglasses. From there, he aggressively and seductively grabs their neck, says let's finish this, punches them across the face, and from there tentacles of Ouroboros go through the ground and it punctures through the back of their head and through their mouth. Kinky, I know. From there, he magically creates new sunglasses and puts them on his face. This one's just definitely gross, it's really cool, and there's a really nice power struggle to it. It's also a grim reminder that you never want to take off Albert Wesker's sunglasses without his permission. Man, it's super fun that the Resident Evil chapter introduced both Knuckle sandwiches and Jill sandwiches. Just a random thought I had. Moving on. And if you thought we were done talking about Resident Evil characters and tentacles, you would be wrong because we are looking at the lethal pursuer, Nemesis. This sees him take one of his long tentacles, shove him through the opponent's chest, throw them to the ground, and just when he thought he was done, he actually pulls you closer to him and he curb stomps your head into the ground with a really disgusting crunch. It's quick, it's effective, and it's also very fitting to Nemesis, something that really only he would be doing. I honestly do wish it included a little bit more slamming with the tentacles, but I do like how it does wrap up so brutally. At the end of this Mori from Nemesis, the survivor will be permanently seeing stars. Alright, if you thought 2 pieces of tentacles were terrible, now we're gonna get to something way worse, looking at clowns with the clown. This sees him go up to the opponent and stomp on their head multiple times until it cracks, and then they're dead. And if you want this to get a little bit more uncomfortable, to add to his keyring collection, he either takes the lady's right index finger or the male's pinky finger on their left hand. That being because Ash Williams had a machine hand and it wouldn't make sense to take a machine hand off of a finger if he can't lick it. And yes, that's what he does. He actually drinks the liquid from it and he puts it on his keyring. Absolutely disgusting. Now, if you wanted another reason to hate clowns, you have another reason to. Clown is absolutely disgusting and gross, and this perfectly captures the character super well. It's also one of the only Moris from Dead by Daylight's early history that involve dismemberment in some way. Actually, not many of Dead by Daylight's Moris do have dismemberment, so I guess we can include this in that small little handful of some that do. At the end of the day, this is good finger food. At number 18, we're looking at the second member of the Yamaoka bloodline, this being the Oni. In his lore, Kazan Yamaoka was ridiculed by a lord calling him Oni Yamaoka after defeating a samurai. From there, he ripped the samurai's tongue out of his mouth and killed them. I bring this up because the Oni does the exact same thing from his lore to the survivor. Stabbing them into the chest with his sword, he reaches into their mouth and rips out their tongue, and just when you think it's over, he wants to have a smashing good time, he strikes them down to the ground multiple times with his kanabo. What I love about this one is that it utilizes a bunch of weapons about the character and does a lot of things that is lore referenced with him, such as the tongue ripping, and it uses both his sword, his bloodlust energy, and the kanabo to make for a very unique and disturbing Mori. It'll just slice right in, it'll give you a smashing good time, leaving you speechless. Coming from the backwater swamp is the Hag. As she needs to feast on human blood and flesh to stay alive, she releases the animalistic side and eats the survivor. Like the Oni, she also rips an organ from them, this being some intestine from their gut, and eats it like a turkey leg at Thanksgiving. Yep, it's absolutely nasty, very Tarkatan-esque, So for that, this tasty treat lands at number 17. Let's take a look into the canvas and appreciate the Mori with the artist. With her fascination with crows, both flying and Brandon Lee ones, she lands on top of them and shoves a bunch of ink down their mouth. The survivor reenacts what having an alien chest burster looks like as a crow pops out from their chest. Honestly, I wish the Xenomorph's Mori was more like this one. Way to one-up an alien artist. I do appreciate the murder of crows hanging around the murder scene, a nice little way to cap it off. This piece may not be a Van Gogh or Picasso, but at least it has a brush stroke of uniqueness to it. K-pop stans can unite as we look at the Trickster at number 15. Though I hate playing against him, I can admit his Mori is pretty awesome, throwing a bunch of daggers at the opponent, with one to their face to knock them onto the ground. And I'm guessing he's a big Johnny Cage main, as he pulls a My Biggest Fan by throwing a pitcher to their body and having the dagger pin it to them. This Mori is just super good. Pretty as a pitcher, wouldn't you say? At number 14, we're seeing what happens after 7 days of watching the VHS tape with Sadako's full Mori. Instead of just finishing them off on the ground, she decides to break new ground by breaking their limbs. Using telekinesis to hyperextend their arm and their leg, drops them to the ground pretty coldly. I do like that as soon as they fall on their back, they're immediately met with the infamous stare. From there, the opponent freezes and their heart stops. Though the bones breaking are added by the Dead by Daylight team, it is somewhat a reference to Ryuji Takayama's death from Ringu. This Mori is just truly a heart stopper. Let's take aim at number 13 all the way from the Wild Wild West with the Death Slinger. I can appreciate the creativity with this one, as it sees the Death Slinger stab the opponent in the back with his gun, lift them in the air, but before you think it's over, the camera changes to another shot just to show the spear shooting through their mouth, and what an amazing use of his power for this one. Honestly, I just love how creative, quick, and snappy this Mori is. It's just very effective and quick to the point. For a character I find to be pretty forgettable, I find this Mori to be very memorable. Like a skilled shooter, it just hits its target. Our second to last cosmetic Mori we'll be looking at comes from one of Behavior Interactive's earlier titles, Naughty Bear. Yeah, it's also cool to see Naughty Bear get some representation in Dead by Daylight. And with this, it feels like a perfect execution from his own game, seeing him drop one of the trappers' bear traps, picking up the opponent, and then going to town with the machete. And just when you think that the survivor is dead, nope, he does one last thing, throws them onto the bear trap, and then does a fun little roar at them. I think what makes this feel very Naughty Bear-esque and really captures that essence is that you have that narrator just speaking and talking to Naughty Bear, encouraging him and just sharing how proud he is. Honestly, my biggest upset with this one is that I wish this is what the trapper would have had as a Mori, but I do think it fits well, as the Naughty Bear is a variant for trapper. Looks like this trapper's variant Mori is unbearable. At number 11, we're looking into the unknown by looking at the unknown. Heads up, if you have an issue with body horror, twitching, and a bunch of weird crunching sounds, you may not like this one, as this one checks off all those boxes. The unknown creepily crawls at you as the survivor tries crawling away, and what makes it unique is that it says some classic film reference, either like Here's Looking at You Kid, The Terror, and a very distorted voice to make it extra creepy. From there, the back opens up with a bunch of creepy tentacles, told you we wouldn't be done talking about those, as they all shoot into your face until the survivor turns into dust and then gets absorbed into the unknown. Not as in like a mysterious place, but into the character that is the unknown. Chapter 31 brought in a lot of horror with this new character, and this Mori just showcases that so well. Man, this Mori is a perfect reason we fear the unknown. Finally slashing into the top 10 with the Legion. Yeah, after all this time looking at supernatural horrors, one of the scariest and creepiest Moris just comes from some teenagers. Yeah, who would have thought? But what I do love about this one is that it feels like there's actual conflict in it as they fight back and forth. I absolutely love it where the Legion goes for a stab and they deflect it with their forearm, and as they try to run away, they trip over their own feet, and that's what actually causes the survivor to face their own demise. They're met with a very creepy stab and then pull down, eviscerating the opponent. Man, with the teenager with just a knife, they're able to do a lot of damage. This Mori just takes guts. From one group of 4 to another group of 4, 4, we're looking at the Knight. Although I wish the Legions utilized the group of friends, the Knights does that and it's very effective. And I love how each one of the Knight's followers does some signature attack to them. The Thief is the first one coming up, stabbing him and throwing him into the Armorer, where he brands them in the neck. From there, as the opponent screams, the other one just throws a battle axe on their shoulder, knocking them to their knees. Tarhos the Knight then wraps it up, shoving his blade deep down into the opponent down their neck, and instead of pulling it out like a simple slasher would, he pulls the blade back straight through their body. Absolutely disgusting stuff. Now I know Tarhos is more of the quiet one, but if he did have a catchphrase here, it would be good night. Number 8, and we're looking at one of the most iconic slashers in all of history, the Ghostface. Even though this one is very simple, just only being a few stabs, a slight reference to the opening of Scream 1, I do like how it's very character driven. As this Ghostface is actually an original character, being Jed Olsen, he's a photographer for a local paper, who just happens to cover Ghostface murders. And to kinda get the pictures like Peter Parker does for Spider-Man, he takes a selfie with the survivor's dying body. Just like Spider-Man. I even like the little attention to detail where if he's looking at the photo to make sure it's good, and after he all approves it, he just rips the knife out of their body. As I said, it's very simple, but driven by character alone. I can understand why the community loves this one so much and places it in the top 5. However, there are several more that I do appreciate way more than this one. With the knife Moris, Ghostface took a stab at it, and it was picture perfect. Things are gonna get strange as we look at the upside down, looking at the Demogorgon. If you've ever wanted to see a very brutal, animalistic Mori, well, here you've got it. The Demogorgon claw pounces on top of the survivor and with its weird Venus flytrap head, bites onto the survivor's head and thrashes them around like it was a dog with a chew toy. The fact that their screams get muffled during this is absolutely terrifying, but I do love the very end where it puts the claw on their body and then it just makes a loud roar as a bunch of blood and bits fly out from their mouth. Truly some disgusting stuff. The Demogorgon's Mori really mind-filleted the survivor. You know, in this list, we've been looking at a lot of bad guys, so why not take a look at the good guy, Chucky the Killer Doll? Okay, actually, he's way worse than the other bad guys. But as a big fan of Chucky, both in the game and the character, I do appreciate all of the references it makes to several Child's Play movies here. Opening with the hammer to the head being a reference to the Aunt Maggie death from the first movie, him jumping on top of them and stabbing him in the back with the ruler being a reference to Mrs. Kittlewell's death from 2, the baseball bat hitting him over the head being a reference to Batter Up from Child's Play 1, and when he goes crazy stabbing him in the neck being a reference to the line that he says in Bride of Chucky, a true classic, never goes out of style, with his knife. And knowing the good old Chuckster, you gotta wrap it up with a really nice quip at the end as he kicks their body. Like Chucky's spiritual chant, this one is Ade do a dem badass.
And to Tiffany, he goes, Ade do a dem dat ass, baby.
We're busting out the tabletops here at number 5, looking at the Lich Vecna. In D&D, when you roll a nat 0 against him, you get this outcome. The Lich pulls you closer to him as a bunch of bastard skellies grab the opponent, and then after he clenches his fist, they all do some fun little degloving, as in ripping off all of the skin off your body. It's quick and very disturbing. It's also something that only he, with his magical prowess, could pull off. And like the skeleton at the end of this Mori, this one is just jaw-dropping. From one user of dark magic to another, we're looking at the Dark Lord Dracula. This count shows what he does in the shadows by swiping with his sharp claws across their neck, causing them to bleed out their neck. And something absolutely fitting and kind of funny in a dark humor sense is that he pulls out a wine glass and puts it right under their neck where the wound is and just drinks it like fine wine. Yeah, I hear that stuff is rich in vitamin B. As the survivor falls to the ground, so does the wine glass as he tosses it to the side. Also, another fun addition is that if you do this to Trevor Belmont, he'll actually insult the guy. I think there's a little tension between them, I'm not super sure. You can always count on Dracula for having a bloody good Mori. Hey, we're not done looking at Dracula yet because we have his true Dark Lord form, where he goes from Dracula to Satan. And just like the devil, he has creepy wings, a giant eye on his stomach, very Nightmare from Soul Calibur-esque, Oh, and some weird tentacle demons coming out from his side. You know, just very good stuff you read from the good Bible. He punches right through their body and lifts them right above him. And I guess the weird tentacles are a lot like piranha or a shark, as they feed on once they smell blood. And from there they go to town, ripping apart the survivor above his head, and then he just throws them off to the side. Man, Dracula's other form has truly an amazing Mori, easily taking the 3rd spot. Our runner-up goes to the Cenobite known as Pinhead.
Who you calling Pinhead?
This season performed something quite unique to the survivor. Instead of finishing them off like any other character, he instead summons a bunch of chains and holds them off the ground. A nice reference to the scene towards the end of the movie with Frank Cotton's demise. Instead of having Jesus weep, Pinhead has such sights to show them as he pins them to a post and sends them to the labyrinth, or hell. It's quite disturbing as they don't really die like the rest of these finishers, but are instead sent to another dimension where they'll experience both pain and pleasure for eternity, a fate worse than death. Guess you can really say that the Cenobite raised hell to get the silver medal. And engulfing itself into the #1 spot is the Fog, the Dredge. Have you ever wondered what encountering a sentient fog would look like? Well, here you go. Truly one of the most terrifying ways to go in the entire game. Trying to get away from this fog as everything it's ever consumed and encountered comes out to try and pull you in. You're met with a bunch of hands holding different tools, just stabbing you just to hurt you, and you even get some weird otherworldly creatures in there, like that weird claw arm that comes out. And from there, a bunch of tiny hands grab the opponent and pull you and absorb you into the fog, just to never be seen or heard from again. Similar to the Cenobite, it's another creepy one where you're just taken to another place. Now you're part of the killer from now on. And even on top of it, just how it's presented is what makes me love this one so much. You're really fighting to try and get away from this killer as everything it's ever consumed is attacking you all at once. For all of these creepy elements and just how well it fits the character super well, the Dredge has the best Mori of all of Dead by Daylight. And so there you have it's really hot after a while. So there you have every single Memento Mori ranked from Dead by Daylight from worst to best. Which one was your favorite and which one was your least favorite? Be sure to let me know down below and let's have a fun discussion about it. Again, this is just my list, it's not the definitive list, so let's not come at me with hateful comments, okay? Let's just have a fun little discussion down there. Happy Halloween, I hope you all have a wonderful spooky season. Dead by Daylight is something that both Rain and I play a lot. If you'd like to see me stream this or if you'd like to join us down the line just to play a few sessions, let me know down in the comments and maybe that can be a thing down the line. And if you want me to cover more Dead by Daylight, please let me know. That would be very wonderful as it was something I covered back in 2020. Also, and speaking of bringing up Rain, we actually did another Smash or Pass video that's currently in the works right now, but that will be going on their channel. So once that is done, I will be sure to link it into the card up here, or I'll be sharing it on my socials. So as soon as that is ready to go, I will let you know. We had a fun time recording it, and I hope you guys have a fun time watching it. As always, thank you so much for tuning into this video, and thank you for your continuous support. You guys mean a ton. My name is Nick, and have a happy Halloween.
Fight!